You're listening to A Day Podcast. Podcast for all things creative. โรงเรียนนานาชาติ International School Podcast. Learning from the expats.
สวัสดีครับคุณผู้ฟังครับผมเต้สุวจนกลิ่นสุวรรณนะครับและขอต้อนรับทุกท่านเข้าสู่โรงเรียนนานาชาตินะครับรายการที่จะนำเสนอเรื่องราวของชาวต่างชาติที่มาอยู่และทำงานในประเทศไทยโดยนอกจากวิชาความรู้เคล็ดลับต่างๆแล้วรวมถึงแรงบันดาลใจจากพวกเขานะฮะเราจะได้เรียนรู้ภาษาอังกฤษและฝึกฟังสำเนียงภาษาอังกฤษที่หลากหลายจากทั่วโลกอีกด้วยนะครับในส่วนของการฟังภาษาอังกฤษนั้นบอกเลยครับว่า EP นี้เนี่ยจะชัดกว่านี้ไม่ได้อีกแล้วนะครับเพราะว่านอกจากแขกรับเชิญของเราเนี่ยจะเป็นชาวอังกฤษนะฮะเจ้าของภาษามาเองแล้วเนี่ยเขาคนนี้ยังเป็น voice over artist นะฮะเรียกว่าเป็นคนลงเสียงโฆษณาที่เก่งอันดับต้นๆของวงการเลยนะฮะไม่ใช่แค่บ้านเรานะแต่เสียงเขาเนี่ยไปมาแล้วทั่วโลกครับ
The all-new Royal Orchid service from Thai. Smooth as silk.
Sapporo Premium Beer
และขอขอบคุณนะฮะผู้สนับสนุนหลักอย่างเป็นทางการนะครับเฮ้ไม่ใช่นะฮะเขายังไม่ได้ซื้อโฆษณาเราแต่ที่เปิดไปเมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยคือโฆษณาที่เจ้าของเสียงเนี่ยนั่งอยู่กับเราตอนนี้นะครับถือโอกาสนี้ขอต้อนรับเพื่อนสนิทของผมนะที่ทำงานด้วยกันมา10 ปีแล้วนะฮะคุณฮิวแอดัมส์ครับสวัสดีครับฮิวครับ
Good afternoon. How are you?
Okay, so far so good. Thank you for coming, Hugh.
My pleasure.
I've just told the audience of how much of a good friend we've been in the past 10 years or so, right?
Yes.
But I'm going to pretend that I don't know you that well. So the questions will sound very professional, like any podcaster will sound, all right?
Fine.
Okay, cool. So how are your hemorrhoids?
I'm more concerned about COVID than hemorrhoids, to be honest. But yes, they're fine. Thank you.
โอ้ยอำเล่นนะครับแหมไม่ได้เป็นลิสีดวงซะหน่อย I'm just joking with you. All right. Now, we heard some ads that you voiced, and people may be wondering, was your voice has it always sounded like this?
Pretty much, yes. I started doing voiceovers in the UK many years ago, probably 30 years ago. I was lucky because I was educated in a part of the country and at a school where received pronunciation was the correct way of speaking. The BBC accent, if you like.
Or they call Queen's English,
Yes.
is it?
Well, Queen's English is a little more highfalutin than RP, but call it BBC English.
All right.
And so you were expected to speak like that.
All right. So world standard, would you say?
Yeah, it's yes, the international standard of English.
All right.
Yes.
Now, is there a trick to having an awesome voice? I mean, can you practice and develop it, or do you have to be born with it?
Sadly, not everybody can do voiceovers because you have to. It is a craft. It's like an actor.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to adjust your voice for whatever is being asked of you. The environment of doing voiceovers is you're sat in a booth, a bit like this one.
Yeah.
But the other side of the glass are maybe 8-10 people who are expecting you to deliver precisely. And I mean precisely what they want out of the voice. So you have to learn to be able to modulate your voice. You need to make it sound slightly younger if you have to.
Right.
Or you go in and do cinema commercials and it's all got to go down there. You've got to have that range. That you have to teach. You have to learn to do that and practice.
I see.
All practice.
Oh, okay. So pretty much since you hit puberty, I mean, you've been sounding like this since...
Well, I worked in media most of my life, so I've been around some very, very good voiceover people.
I see.
And from an early time in my career, I thought, that looks like a good job. You turn up, you sit there, everybody's looking at you, you do your bit, and then half an hour later, you walk out with a lot of money. And I thought, that's the job for me.
Okay, ideal job, huh?
Yes.
All right. So which voiceover job are you most proud of?
That's very difficult to say because every job you do means so much to the people you're doing it for.
Yeah.
And while in a week I might do a commercial for BMW, I might do a documentary for Discovery Channel, I might do a commercial for a hospital, each one of those producers wants the very best from you.
Right.
And how they expect it to be, what their vision is for the sound. So... as a result, you can't really pick something that's the best or that you're most proud of. But I think that one example of one that was very tricky, and I was pleased came off, was around the death of His Majesty King Bhumibol. And I was asked to do a documentary about his life.
Right.
Literally the day after or 2 days after he'd passed away.
Right.
Now, I've lived here in Thailand long enough
Right.
to understand fully the sensitivities
Of course.
around that. However, grief is something that is expressed differently in different cultures.
Right.
And while we are talking about a beloved Thai king, we are doing this documentary in English.
Right.
So a lot of I've got to be careful of picking my words right here. A lot of the wording that would be used in a Thai language voiceover is inappropriate in an English language voiceover. Also in the tonality of your voice. You have to create an atmosphere around the piece. And that was tricky. That was to hit the right sensitivities without offending anybody.
Right.
But also without upsetting the English listening audience.
Of course. And that time you were with Channel 3.
Channel 3, yes. It was for Channel 3.
Okay, cool.
That's right.
Now, Hugh Adams, that's your stage name.
It is.
Right. How did that come about?
It's my father's middle name. So I took my first and my Christian name and then my father's middle name as a surname because my real last name is not a common one and is often misspelt.
I see.
So for working on radio and so on and so forth, it was better to have, like most actors and voiceover people,
Right.
you have a stage name.
Right. So let's give it a try for how you would introduce yourself. This is Hugh Adams for, at that time was FM 88.
88. It would be, good morning, FM 88. It's Hugh Adams with you through till 10 this morning. Let's get on with some music and so on and so forth.
Okay. A very familiar voice for, radio fans back in the days, right? Okay. Now let's go back a bit, Hugh. All right. You were born in England and went to a top school called Rugby.
Yes, rugby
Right.
school, yes.
Rugby school. All right. So is that what they do there all day? Play rugby?
Well, yes. Looking back on it, it kind of feels a bit like that.
Right,
Yes, because playing rugby in England is a game that's played during the winter. So for a whole half of the year, you spend your life cold and wet.
Okay.
And I played rugby reasonably well, so I got into the upper level teams.
Okay.
And so I spent most of my school days wet and cold and miserable playing rugby.
Right. What position were you?
Second row.
Second row.
Yeah, second row in the scrum.
So you weren't that big.
Yes, I was that big and heavy. And so the second row in rugby, for those that don't follow it, when they have a scrum, they have the front row, which is the people responsible for getting the ball out.
Okay.
The row behind is the row that's responsible for pushing the other team the other way.
I see.
Okay, sort of off the ball. So if you're big and strong, then you always get put in the second row to push forward.
I see. How did you get into the media industry at first, Ajahn Hugh?
Much against my parents' will, I have to say. Going to this kind of school that I had gone to, and with both my parents being medical people, it was anticipated that either myself or my brother would end up as doctors, surgeons, or lawyers at the very outside.
Right.
When I was at school, a friend of my mother's took me to the BBC
Okay.
in Birmingham, the studios in Birmingham, and I spent a day with him at the BBC. And something happened to me. I just looked at the BBC and I thought, this is a magic factory. There are people here whose job it is to create magic.
Right.
Day in, day out. That's all they do.
Yeah.
And I just totally fell in love with it.
Okay.
And I went home and I started...
How old were you at that time?
Quite young, about 12.
Oh, okay.
12 or 13.
Right.
And I went home and started building... Because in those days, television cameras were huge.
Yeah.
They weighed a quarter of a ton. I mean, they were massive things. And I went home and I got all my mum's old big boxes of washing machine powder and the middle of toilet rolls to make the lenses and started building television cameras at home. Just to sort of mock up a BBC studio. I just totally fell in love with it and decided that that's what I would do as a career. But really, it was a hobby. So in many respects, I've never worked a day in my life. Because every time somebody calls me and asks me to go to a studio or whatever it happens to be like today, to me, it's fun. I'm enjoying myself. Whether I get paid for it or don't get paid for it, it's still fun.
Okay.
So I never have one of those mornings when I wake up, oh, God, I can't be bothered to go to work. It never happens.
Right.
I'll be so lucky.
Okay. So within the field of media, you've been doing... voiceover, of course, we know about that. You've been behind the lenses as well as performing in front of the camera.
That's true. Unfortunately, voiceover work is something you can do regardless of what else you do, providing you can get the time to go to the studio to do it. My start in the business was behind the cameras, so I was an operational person, dealing with studios and edit suites and so on and so forth, and then started doing voiceover work while I was doing that.
Right.
Then,
so that's more fun and more pay.
Well, you get more money in a shorter time, certainly. Yes,
okay,
that's true. And then I was on my way to Hong Kong, and I was asked to stop here to do a project for Channel 3 to build some new studios.
And I understand you were one of the first few people who actually got permission from the government to broadcast outside of the PRD.
We were. It wasn't me personally. It was the management team at Channel 3, but we built these beautiful studios, which I designed from the ground up. And the first time in Thailand, these lovely digital radio studios, got them built. And there was a level of trust built up between us and the authority at the time.
Okay.
And they did eventually allow us to move out of Radio Thailand, as it was then, out of Radio Thailand to our own studios. Because obviously Radio Thailand's ability to modify their equipment is limited by government expenditure and so on.
Of course.
And we had this beautiful suite of new studios, which they very graciously allowed us to use.
Right. So that was the first time you landed in Thailand for this project.
For that project. That's why I stayed here, yes, was for that project.
So you didn't go to Hong Kong?
No.
Okay.
No, never got there. Well, I've been since, but I never went to work there.
Right. So I mean, what was it about Thailand that made you stay?
The challenge.
Challenge?
Yeah, because where I worked in the UK was actually owned by a very famous Australian media magnate. I won't say which one, you can guess.
Okay. Starts with an R and ends with has last name with an M. Okay.
Yes, yeah. And within the company, there was perceived or actual, what I would call an Australian ceiling, like a glass ceiling, above which the English didn't go very often. And I was kind of banging my head against any further promotion within the company.
Right.
And I thought, well, I'll go and do something else. I was financially independent at the time, so I thought Asia. I knew that Star TV was looking in Hong Kong, and I thought I'll go and find out what Asia's like. Stopped here. And just through meeting people, one thing and another, I've stayed here ever since.
Ever since. So it's been 25 years. 5 years already.
Yep. I did a year in Malaysia, and I did 6 months in Brunei.
Yeah.
But other than that, I've been here the whole time.
Right. So from backstage in the control room and behind the camera, and then all of a sudden become a breakfast DJ. For a very popular radio program. Yeah,
originally on 95.5 and then moving to 88. About 12 years in total, I think, doing the breakfast in Bangkok.
That was pretty much a dramatic change in career shift, do you think?
Well, I built the studios. Which really helped because I knew the studios inside out.
Right.
And being a DJ is not quite as simple as people think it is, because it's not like a television studio where you have a crew of 18 people running the studio. With a radio DJ is on his own, generally speaking. He may have a producer that helps him with phone calls, but he's basically on his own. So everything you hear is triggered, if you like. He has to push a button for it to happen. So it's a bit like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time. You've got to be able to talk and use your hands all at the same time.
Right.
And it was a challenge, and it was easy for me because I built the studios. I knew my voice was safe. That's how I ended up doing it.
Right. And so looking at this from the big picture, there's radio, which was invented, in the early...
Donkeys years ago.
Yeah. And then
between the two wars.
Between two wars. And then they became TV, cable TV, VHS, DVDs, and now you got YouTube, Netflix, and podcasts. Is radio going to die soon?
No.
Why?
Because of radio's accessibility. There are still, factories full of thousands of people who will let a radio be played in the factory, but will never allow televisions to be put up in a factory for people to watch. So the only entertainment the factory workers get will be through audio only. So radio still has a place there. It is dangerous to watch TV while you're driving. So still, most people, quite sensibly, will listen to radio. People are very loyal to radio. When you come home in the evening from work or whatever, the kids come home from school, They walk in, they turn the TV on. It's the first thing they do.
Yeah.
What's the next thing they do?
They sit down.
No. They start chopping around the channels, trying to find what it is they want to watch.
The zip-zap people.
Yeah, the zip-zap people. Everybody does it. I do it.
Yeah.
Radio, you get in your car in the morning to go to work, and it's the same radio station that was there yesterday. It's very rare that people will move from their favorite radio station.
True.
So there's tremendous listener loyalty to radio stations.
All right, cool. So maybe if you could share with us a trick or two of how to be a successful media guy using your voice as the main tool in producing content.
Know what your limitations are, first of all. Know what you can do and what you can't do.
Okay.
You have to have no ego, no sense of embarrassment.
Okay.
Because you have to be able to give the producer who's paying you to be there anything they ask for. And by God, I've been asked for some strange things.
Oh, really?
Over there. I'm not going to go into the details. But I've been asked to voice some very strange things over the years.
Trying to imagine, yeah.
And you must understand that your job is to make those people happy.
Yeah.
You are not there because you're a star, even if you may be. You could be the most famous voiceover guy in the world. You are not the star. The product, the finished product, whether it's a documentary or a commercial, that's the star. And you have to give it whatever you have to give it.
Right.
And you cannot be self-conscious about it at all. I mean, you can do a commercial like Thai Airways, which I've done in the past, and you can end up saying the same four words, Thai smooth as silk, 50 times in 50 different ways, with very slightly nuanced changes between the pronunciation of each word.
Okay.
And they may end up using 3 or 4 different versions of it. But when the producer says, okay, we love that one, Thai smooth as silk, but we need you to change the smooth to da-da-da-da-da. And you end up with a script, which was one line of script, with so many notes and stuff scribbled all over it.
Right.
And it's not that you're doing it wrong, it's you're giving them options for what they want. So you must always be prepared to give the options that they're seeking from you, even if they never use them.
So never expect a 9-to-5 kind of job.
No way, impossible.
Right.
You can go... a commercial which you may be playing as an example for Sapporo beer, and I walked in. The gentleman from the client was, I believe, from Korea, and he didn't speak any English at all. The only English he knew was the word movie, and he came into the booth, and I'd literally just walked into the booth, was standing up in front of the microphone, and he went, like movie. That's all he said. That was the only briefing he gave me.
All right.
So I leant into the microphone and I did my Sapporo premium beer like that. That was not a good example because we're not in a big studio. But and I did my thing. First take, bang, out I went. That was it.
That was it.
Yep, that was it. One take.
And that commercial went international.
That commercial went international. I got repeat fees for it, or residuals as it's called, and I got a string of work doing movie trailers from it. So there you go. You just don't know.
Okay, cool. So how do you perceive the media industry in Thailand when compared to other parts of the world, especially in England?
That's tricky because I've worked in it. So you have 2 distinct halves to the industry here. You have a half which is what I call lowest common denominator, where they are aiming at the lowest common denominator in terms of an audience, which translates into the largest audience.
Right.
Okay, so they're pleasing as many people as simply as possible.
For the ratings.
For the ratings, in order to sell commercial airtime. On the other side, you have the state broadcasters of 2 different types, a public service broadcaster and a public broadcaster, big different, with NBT being, in effect, the voice of the government. So they're quite restricted on the amount of analysis and what have you they could do. And Thai PBS, who are more modelled on the BBC with a level of independence. Never the twain shall meet. You cannot be one and the other at the same time.
Right.
And that's always very tricky because it creates a polarization in the industry, which we've seen a lot of in the US, for example. The Fox News is what Fox News is because it sells advertising.
Of course.
Not because Rupert Murdoch has any particular right-wing views. He may have, he may not have. But the fact is he knows that there was a hole in the market, and so that's what he filled it with.
Voila.
Voila.
Okay.
And that's what happens when you go lowest common denominator rather than the BBC model of a public service broadcaster with the emphasis on service.
Now, as a Brit who professionally uses the English language with in your case, absolute clarity, right? So
thank you.
how irritating is it to find that your language, the English language, is being used, spoken by so many accents around the world?
Not at all. I'm bloody glad of it.
Even if I speak English with a Thai accent like this?
It's fine with me.
No.
Fine by me.
Oh,
What's the difference between that and a Yorkshire accent?
I don't know.
Or a Welsh accent? Or an Edinburgh accent? What's the difference? Or a Singaporean accent? Or an American accent? Or an Australian accent? What's the difference? There isn't a difference.
Right.
What it's all about is the message. So provided I can understand what message you're trying to get over to me, I'm happy.
Right.
The English, certainly native English speakers, we're not critical of how other people speak English. 281 different dialects and accents around the world speaking English.
Yeah.
90 within the UK alone.
Within the island.
Within the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England, 90 different accents and dialects.
Right.
Some of which are almost completely incomprehensible.
Right. Can you give us some examples of something you could kind of mock?
Well, I mean, I don't want to take the mickey out of people, but you listen to a thick Glaswegian accent. Hey, Europeans, they got a sense of humour, haven't they? It's like, well, yeah, those Europeans, they've got a sense of humour, haven't they? That's how I would say it, but a Glaswegian won't, because it's a thick Scottish accent.
Right.
You go down the east end of London, and they're all out there, apples and pears, went and saw the beer. No. Yeah. But we understand it. Now, just because you happen to use Tinglish, talking to me just now, what's the difference?
Right.
Between me deciphering what a Cockney is saying to me or what an Australian is saying to me and what you just did. There is no difference.
But of course, for Thai people, we'd be like, we're afraid that you're going to be like, not understanding us. And then, in that sense, because or kind of being shy.
Yeah, because you're taught English on a rules-based system. And in social communication, in English, there are no rules. As long as you're polite, please and thank you. Other than that, you do not have, as I was mentioning to somebody earlier, written English is the hardest possible version of English there is to get right.
All right.
Social interaction in English is the easiest to get right. The problem is that teachers tend to aim at the written version and say the spoken English needs to follow that example.
That's the standard.
Yeah, that's the standard. That's where your spoken English should be.
Right.
And that's codswallop. It's rubbish. Because actually, you're in order to promote the use of English and to encourage the use of English, people should be taught this is a durable language.
Right.
It's flexible. It suffers mistakes.
Right.
So don't worry about the fact that you get two words the wrong way around, or you use the present perfect instead of whatever. You just use it. We'll understand.
Right.
And if we don't understand, we'll ask.
All right.
Cool.
I tell you, apart from being in the media, in front and behind of the lens and the mic, you've also been teaching journalism and mass communication at Thammasat University.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, together with me for the past
9
years already. You?
Yeah, it must be nearly.
Wow. Time flies, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So
you're making me feel so old.
So, from your in your perspective, do you really think the young generation today really need to study journalism and mass communication when anybody could be a YouTuber, anybody could be a blogger, anybody could be a podcaster?
Of course you do.
Still.
Of course you do, because sooner or later there is going to be a perfect storm of partisanship, if you like, where the media goes so far into the various corners that it becomes unwatchable.
You mean?
All right, let's use as a simple example the US.
Right.
Where there are still, fortunately, people like ABC News and so on and so forth and NPR who try to hit a middle ground in terms of their reporting. It's factual reporting without any particular bias, left or right. Okay. The rest of America started that way, but has now, with the arrival of Fox News, which has taken one part of journalism all the way off to the right politically, people like CNN and MSNBC, who were very middle ground initially, have now drifted off to the left. So you've ended up with this great gap in the middle.
Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, you've ended up with this great, whether it's Democrats, Republicans, or left or right, whichever way you want to describe it. But this gap in the middle where there is a vacuum of factual public service news provision.
Right.
Sooner or later, that system must collapse. It cannot continue like that.
Right.
It will sooner or later collapse, for good or for worse, whichever way it goes. But people need to learn and understand that there is a space for proper journalism, proper, respectful journalism, which involves investigation, which involves facts and fact-checking, which involves more than one source, all of the rules that normal journalism applies.
Right.
The world needs that kind of reporting. The stuff you're getting at the moment from the polarized journalism, you don't know what to believe. And that's a horrible place for people to be. 6 billion people on this planet, and nobody quite knows who they should be believing.
Right. Not to mention the user-generated content.
Well, quite. You go back 30 years, and you could rely, in the UK, for example, on the BBC. While they've always been a little liberal in their leaning, you could always rely on the factual content of what they were saying. And that was, a reputation built up through world wars, through, whatever. And to lose that kind of centrist reporting and proper journalism would be a crying shame, which is why we need to educate people now to get involved in proper, correct, unbiased reporting. That doesn't mean you can't have an opinion, but you've got to differentiate editorializing from reporting.
Right. All of which done with integrity.
Yes. Yes, of course. I mean, if you're going to editorialize, i.e. comment, you say this is editorializing. What you don't do is put Tucker Carlson or someone up on the screen pretending to report news and in fact editorializing. You look at, as an example, Morning Joe on MSNBC, and I can't watch it because the questions that they ask their interviewees are so long, they last an entire block, which is the period between two commercial breaks.
Right.
So that Joe Scarborough will start a question. He'll have a guest on, say, okay, our next guest is, Representative so-and-so from Arkansas. And he'll then go into 8 minutes of opinion before asking the guy a question.
Okay.
Leading up to the question. What the bloody hell's the point of that? So they've both been forced in that direction.
Okay.
Someone has to learn how to sit opposite someone like you and ask a direct question and pursue it until you get a direct answer.
The problem is lots of people, especially politicians, they don't like that, and they don't give the correct answer, and they don't give a straightforward answer.
That's the price you pay when you take the job. You are the people's representative, and as a politician, you are bound to report back to the people.
Right.
This is not an option. They're trying to create the atmosphere that it is an option whether you answer a journalist question or not. But provided the journalist question is fair, you have an obligation to answer that question.
Right.
And just avoiding the media or refusing to answer or putting your hand up and saying, I've had enough today, in the past would have lost you your job. We, as a society, have learnt to accept that. We shouldn't. These people should be held accountable.
Right. So until when and how can, just for Thailand for now, how the media, especially news, when will they be, most, let's say the general media be brave enough to kind of encounter people like that?
They used to be. If you think back to the days of ITV and when Channel 3 News, when it was in its prime, and they would do heavy investigative pieces, investigating corruption, investigating people's problems and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, the laws have quietly been changed regressively over the past decade, which now makes that legally very difficult to do. Until there is a revision of what the media is allowed to do, is protected from, we will be stuck in this current situation. It can't change.
All right, let's look forward to the future. All right, so I mentioned this before, from radio to TV to cable to VHS, DVDs, YouTube, Netflix. As a media professor and a veteran of this industry, what will be tomorrow's platform?
It will be along the lines of the streaming platforms, I believe.
All right.
I think that there is a limited tolerance for, pardon my French, crap. and YouTube is 99.999% crap.
Right.
Okay, which is why the 0.001% who do actually produce something good get so rich from it. The rest of it is cobblers. I mean, it's just not worth watching.
But then again, it's like, funny content and not worth the view. But then they get like all these, so many eyeballs. I mean, what does that reflect?
That's a different argument. That goes into monetizing media. That's a whole other discussion. We could do a whole other podcast on.
Okay.
I'm talking about the audience and their tolerance for this stuff. A lot of people still watch media that is produced by organizations.
Right.
But they happen to watch it on YouTube. So, if you want to watch a frontline documentary from the US, you might watch it on their YouTube channel rather than watching it on PBS in the USA because you don't have access to it. So that's how you do. So still, a lot of YouTube content is serious stuff made by professionals.
Right.
Okay. But that's still only the 0.01% of it.
Yeah.
The rest of it is all people showing you how to put on mascara, which, I'm just thinking, for God's sake.
You should try some.
Put
on some mascara.
I've tried it. My daughter said it doesn't suit me. I'm kidding.
Nah.
But, it's just, it's mindless. And that's the problem, is that it becomes like a baby's dummy. The pacifiers they give babies, which I've never gave my children. When the baby starts crying, you stick a dummy in its mouth and it shuts up.
Yep.
That's YouTube. That's where we are with the younger generation now. They just turn to that as some sort of pacifier to get them away from what they perceive as being some awful environment that they're in, rather than actually doing something to change the environment they're in.
True.
And that's a real worry, to be honest. But streaming, from a personal point of view, the place of the BBC and companies like it, or businesses or broadcasters like it, is still very important. Because they produce stuff that would never get through a commercial screening process, going back to monetizing content. They still create stuff which people afterwards say, oh, that was fabulous. And everybody wants to buy it, it gets syndicated, it gets broadcast all around the world. But nobody would have taken a commercial decision to do it in the first place. A classic example would be, the TV series Fawlty Towers. You've heard of that? About the hotel, one of the most famous TV series ever made out of the UK.
No.
Oh, either way, but it's sold in, I think it's 97 countries now.
Okay. Thailand as well?
No, never here, because it would be almost impossible to translate the humour.
Okay.
But I don't know why here. Maybe too expensive. But the BBC, when it was submitted, it was John Cleese starts it from Monty Python.
Okay, Monty Python.
John Cleese wrote it with his wife, Connie Booth. And when they submitted it to the BBC, I've actually got a copy of the letter from the commissioning editor of the BBC saying this is an absolute load of rubbish. It's never going to go anywhere. It's not funny. Don't buy it. Okay. The BBC overrode him and did go ahead and buy it. And it's now just about the most successful comedy series ever made anywhere on the planet.
Right.
You're right up there with Seinfeld and all the rest of it.
So one of the biggest challenges in this industry is creating concept and content into something you could actually hear, read, and see, and make sure it hits the audience.
Well, obviously the audience is key. Without audience, there's no point in doing it. The problem is that most decisions, 99.whatever% of decisions are made on content creation, investment in content, are made as a financial commercial decision. That is a decision that public broadcasters like Thai PBS or like the BBC or whatever, that's a decision they don't have to make. They make it based upon the value of the content.
True.
And there must always be a space in the media industry for content produced because it's good, not because necessarily it's going to sell like hotcakes to syndicates.
Right. Wow. So, we've learned a lot from you, from your 25 years experience in Thailand, and of course your decades of experience in the media industry. So 25 years living and working and having a family in Thailand. What is the one most important thing that you've learned?
Tolerance. With a capital T.
With a capital T.
With a capital
Why
T.
not capsize it all, the entire word?
Well, it wouldn't look right.
Okay.
So, no, tolerance, being taught, not being taught, having to learn tolerance.
How?
Because Thailand, I was a complete fish out of water when I came here. Right. I'd never been to Asia before. I could easily live in France or Germany or the United States or any of those places. Within my own culture, be very happy. I would have very little to learn in order to survive. Here was like trying to teach a fish to live on land. It was that different.
Wow.
I entered an environment where the food was strange, the culture was strange, the people were strange, the habits were strange. Nothing was familiar to me whatsoever. And Thailand remains one of the few countries in the world which has very little, certainly when I came here 25 years ago, very little spoken English. When I first came here, it was almost unheard of to hear a Thai speak English 25 years ago. My food, I had to, there were potatoes were priced individually. Each potato had a price sticker on it in the supermarket because it's such a rare item, and yet to me, that's my rice.
Okay.
And so I had to make all these adaptations. And I had to do them. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't my choice to do them. I had to do them if I was going to survive. And I am so glad I did it because it taught me a level of tolerance I would never have believed I was capable of.
Right. So let me ask you again. What do you think is the thing that you love the most about Thailand then?
A combination of unpredictability and freedom, which seems a strange word to use.
Right.
But I'm not a Thai. So therefore, I don't feel the cultural pressures or political pressures that a Thai person would feel.
Right.
I'm kind of immune from that. So I get to the best of Thailand without having to worry about the worst of it, which an indigenous Thai would see and feel and feel the pressure.
Right.
I'm aware of it because I work in news, so of course I'm aware of it.
Of course.
But it doesn't directly impact on me. So I get up in the morning. Most days it's sunny. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to wear. I know that I'm going to be comfortable as long as my air conditioning's working. The biggest panic of my life is when the aircon starts dripping. So I think just the sense of goodwill, freedom, and kind of tolerance, I think, is what I appreciate about them.
I see. Where is home? Thailand or England?
Oh, now that's a tricky question. There's, I can't remember who the poet was, Blake, I think, said that there will be forever a corner of a foreign field that is forever England. I don't think an Englishman, in his heart of hearts, can ever say that his home is outside the UK. Rather like a Thai of all people would understand that.
Of course, yeah.
You are born into a culture. It may have something to do with monarchy. I'm not at all sure, because the English, share a commonality with Thais in that we both have a monarchy, and we both have a very specific feeling towards our own country, which is not always the case with other nationalities. So, would I want my ashes scattered here or in the UK? I would have to say the UK. But because my generations live there. My generations are there. I'm the only one of the family that has ever gone to live abroad.
Right.
But while my ashes are scattered over there, I consider this home now.
I see.
For the time being, I don't see myself. When I go back to the UK, it tends to be for a couple of days, go and get my fish and chips, go to the pub, say hi to the cousins, and then I go off skiing or I go down to the south of France. So I'm not that faithful.
Of course. One last question, Hugh. If we were going to make a movie about you, what would be the title of that movie? And who's going to play you?
Think positive.
Think positive.
Think positive.
All right.
Yeah.
And who will be playing Hugh Adams?
It's almost a jokey answer, but there's an actor who I don't think you'll be familiar with. His name is Tom Baker. He played Doctor Who for a while in a TV series, Doctor Who. And he became very famous for doing the voiceover for Little Britain. Do you remember the comedy series Little Britain? Did you get that out here at all? You may not, because it was rather rude. But he has a lovely voice. And he's rather manic. Look him up, Tom Baker.
Tom Baker.
He's a complete nutcase. But still an exceptionally good at what he does. Lovely voice, a very well-known voice, and yes, I think I'd probably like him to play me. He's got the right twinkle in his eye.
All right.
Yeah.
นะครับก็จริงๆผมกับอย่างที่เกินไปนะผมกับอาจารย์ฮิวนะหรือบางทีผมเรียกเขานะฮิวเนี่ยก็เป็นเพื่อนกันมาเป็น10 ปีนะทำงานด้วยกันมานะฮะอยู่ด้วยกันมาทั้งไทย PBS ช่อง 3 สอนหนังสือด้วยกันนะฮะแล้วก็มีหลายๆโปรเจกต์ที่เวลาผมทำเนี่ยไม่เขาก็ลูกสาวเขาเนี่ยทำด้วยกันแต่วันนี้นะฮะในการมาจัดพอดแคสต์ด้วยกันที่โรงเรียนนานาชาติ A Day Podcast เนี่ยนะฮะก็ทำให้ผมได้มองมุมมองใหม่ๆได้ฟังอะไรใหม่ๆจากเพื่อนสนิทผมคนนี้เหมือนกันนะฮะซึ่งทำให้เชื่อเหลือเกินว่าคุณผู้ฟังเนี่ยก็น่าจะสามารถเก็บอะไรเป็นทั้งแง่คิดนะฮะเรียนรู้จากประสบการณ์ของชายคนนี้นะครับแล้วหวังว่าจะเป็นแรงบันดาลใจนะให้หลายๆคนเนี่ยได้เรียนรู้นะฮะจากประสบการณ์ของชายคนนี้นะฮะที่อยู่ในแวดวงอุตสาหกรรมเป็นชาวต่างชาติคนที่อยู่เมืองไทยมา25 ปีนะฮะทำงานในสื่อมาจะ40 ปีแล้วนะครับก็เชื่อเหลือเกินนะฮะว่าจะมีค่ามากๆและรวมถึงนะฮะการได้ฟังเสียงเพราะๆของอาจารย์ฮิวนะฮะที่ทำให้เราน่าจะสามารถเอาไปต่อยอดในการพัฒนาภาษาอังกฤษได้นะฮะยังไงต้องขอบคุณอาจารย์ฮิวมากเลยครับ Thank you Hugh
That's my great pleasure
All right hopefully we'll see you again next time we invite you in
No, I'll be
All right, thank you.
delighted to do it
และทั้งหมดนี้ก็คือโรงเรียนนานาชาติขอบคุณทุกท่านครับสวัสดีครับ
ติดตาม A Day Podcast ได้ทาง adaymagazine.com Joox Apple Podcast Spotify Podbean SoundCloud และ A Day Magazine YouTube Channel